Look at, for example, the issue of climate change, you know.
Hmm.
Well, you have the Greens and NDPs who are like no more pipelines, you know.
Hmm.
It's a good thing to say here in Ontario, but they don't really care about what people think
Alberta,
in Alberta, you know,
BC,
because they don't
Saskatchewan.
have the NDP doesn't have that strong of a support over there, and the
Hmm.
Greens also. But Trudeau with the Liberals, they actually have some seats that can win, and you know.
You bought a pipeline. You can't be a climate leader and spend 10 to 13 billion dollars more on a project that by itself blows through our carbon
Okay,
budget.
okay.
We have
You,
to
a
actually ground
slogan
this.
is not a plan,
No,
Ms.
we
May.
have a
A
plan. Check
slogan
Mission
is not a plan.
Possible.
It is an
Justin,
unrealizable
honestly,
plan.
no,
Canadians
it's been
need that
assessed by a
action
group.
that is going to actually make us
But
better,
if
fight climate change, protect the environment, and build a stronger economy for our kids.
I think
Hmm.
60% of Albertans prefer the Conservatives, or it's maybe higher than that. So,
Hmm.
you know, these like they really wouldn't be representing the whole of the country, you know. And
Yeah.
part of you as a federal leader is to represent the country as a whole. You can't just be like the government in Ontario, you know.
Hmm.
You actually have to represent the interests of people in Alberta and strike a middle line, you know. That's why you've
Hmm.
been hearing Trudeau say, well, we'll have this pipeline and then we'll reinvest all the revenue in green tech, you know.
Hmm.
That's a reasonable, you know, but just saying no more pipelines from here on out, you know, like,
But it is. But even Justin Trudeau saying that for a lot of progressive, it's like, well, that's a double negative. It's like, why would you use money from an oil pipeline to use in renewable energy? How about we just cut it out all the way? Like he saw when it was they were protesting in, I think it was Montreal or whatever, and he was protesting climate change. People are like, "Well, why this guy's protesting himself?" and
yeah.
it was hilarious, but it's also one of those where it's like reality hits social media. It's like once you get into office and you actually have to do policies that are going to advance the economy, you have to be realistic about these things.
Mhm.
Because even Jagmeet Singh later on has said that, well, I wouldn't have expanded the pipeline, but once I get into office, I'm gonna have to look at it, and I'm gonna have to see what type of asset it is, and I mean how much the asset is worth,
Mhm.
whatever, whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, even he in the back of his head, he kind of knows, like, fam, it social media is not real life. You have to get into office and you have to do things that are gonna advance the economy, and we can move now into the environment because the
Mhm.
Angus Reid Institute said that 50%, 53% of respondents say that the expansion should continue for the Trans
Mhm.
Mountain pipeline, and 24 say it should be stopped.
Mhm.
So basically, the Liberals bought the pipeline for 4.5 billion last year. Some
Mhm.
construction is already underway, and the government now say the expanded pipeline will be operational in mid 2022. And
Mhm.
this kind of goes into climate change and also indigenous rights, because
Mhm.
I didn't really, well, we already saw how big climate change and the environment has been
Mhm.
a big topic in the US debate,
Mhm.
and now in the Canadian debate it is one of the biggest topics you can have, like, for especially because millennials are the largest voting bloc.
Mhm.
Like this environment is coming up over and over and over again, and it's very interesting to see because I didn't know that even when it comes to the pipeline, even some indigenous group are willing to purchase it in terms to just be within the business of it, because one of the indigenous people said we always have been the short end of the stick. A lot of resources that leave our territory, we never benefited from those resources. From a
Mhm.
business standpoint of view, it makes sense to look at economic reconciliation. So some people see this pipeline as economic reconciliation if the money could be poured back into indigenous communities.
We need to keep moving forward in a way that respects Indigenous peoples, respects that there's going to be a range of views, but is grounded in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples that you have consistently blocked through your party's actions. That is not respect for Indigenous peoples. Perry Bellegarde, the Grand Chief of the head of the Assembly of First Nations, has said that no government has done more for Indigenous peoples than this government, and he's one of your constituents, Mr. Scheer.
I kind of saw it here and there, but Green Party is important in the sense that it kind of keeps you accountable as a government. It tells you it shows it kind of keeps you to the point where you're like, okay, I have to reach certain targets. A lot of times when Elizabeth May is talking to Justin Trudeau, it's like when your mom talking to you and you're getting lectured, but it's at the end of the day, it's for your own good.
To avoid catastrophic levels of global warming, we must double our current target. We must listen to science. We must not build the Trans Mountain Pipeline. It's not the last, because it gets canceled if we're serious. You can't negotiate with physics. You can't as Prime Minister, you can't as leader of the Liberal Party. There's a carbon budget. It doesn't budge. And that's why it's so heartbreaking for me to look at you today and know you could have done so much more the last 4 years. Please, God, you don't get a majority this time around, because you don't keep your promises.
From the Rockies to the Bay of Fundy, Conservative premiers have gotten elected on promises to do nothing on climate change, and we need a strong federal government to fight them, to make sure that we are moving forward on protecting the future generations from the impacts of climate change.
But your goal is a target for failure. When you hang on to Harper's target of 30% by 2030,
we are going to pass that target, Ms.
Well,
May.
you better get to double that target, or you never get to carbon neutrality by 2050.
Time is up.
Yeah.
A lot of times she was saying, well, I'm so disappointed. Like, how can you not have, I'm so disappointed that you bought the pipeline. You should, and when Justin Trudeau says his lines or whatever, he's like, what are your targets? Like, she wants concrete answers. She doesn't want no more rhetoric that just pleases the crowd, which I found really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's if we want to talk about the prospects of these elections, you can see like Elizabeth May has a really realistic view of the election, you know. So one of the things that in the debates she turned in the English debate she turned towards Scheer and said, with all due respect, Mr. Scheer, you're not going to be the prime minister, you know.
Yeah.
So
Weeks left in this election campaign, Canadians can know one thing. At this point, Mr. Scheer, with all due respect, you're not going to be Prime Minister. The question is going to be on a seat count if we have Mr. Trudeau in a minority or Mr. Trudeau in a majority. Voting for Green MPs is your very best guarantee, Canada, that you don't get the government you least want.
Mr. Scheer can respond to that, and then we'll wrap it up.
Well, I'm going to prove you wrong on that, Ms. May.
Well,
You just watch on October 21st.
I'll lay you.
she's really banking on a minority government where the Justin Trudeau has the chance to form a minority government, and then would go in coalition with the Greens, and probably would need the NDPs to have the confidence of the House. So she's been realistic, and for those who actually like climate change, you know, who are really concerned, they should really be considering the possibility of a liberal minority government with
yeah.
in coalition with the Greens, because the Greens would really put in a lot of checks on the liberals on those fronts of pipelines and whatever. But it would be interesting to see what the negotiations would be, because the Greens and the NDPs are strongly against the pipelines, but the liberals really want to bank on their investments, you know, because it would be a major failure if after this election the liberals, if they're a minority government, they just decide not to continue with the pipelines.